Saturday, March 12th. Not a lot of change in the weather. And so another short day. These 5Ks are going to kill me. So this week marks the 1-year anniversary of our experience with COVID. And so I guess I'll jump on the bandwagon and spend the week, most of the week, reflecting on what that has been like. In particular, focusing on what the last year during COVID has been like as a teacher, and with a wife who's a frontline worker, and 2 kids, one in high school and one in college. I'm sure many of you can relate, and everyone has their stories. So I'll share mine here. I'll start tomorrow. A 10K on Saturday, March 13th. And it went well. It's chilly, but the skies are clearing, so that's nice. I was super cold this morning when Mickey had run her 3rd cross-country race of the year, and she had a lot of mud to deal with thanks to the rain of the past few days, but she held up well and did a good job. So 1 year ago today, on March 13th, it was a Friday the 13th, and our school was supposed to have classes for another 2 weeks before our spring break, when it was announced, I think, 3rd period. At the start of the day, we had no clue we were going to be going home for an extended break. But about 3rd period, they announced that we would be starting our spring break on Monday. The kids would not be coming home. And so we were completely unprepared. We were not ready for this at all. As I recall, I tried to get kids to take books from my school library, my in-class library, home, so that they would have something to read. And at that time, I don't remember anyone being clear whether we were moving our spring break, our 2 weeks of break, just up 2 weeks and we would not have our regular break, or whether we were going to have 2 weeks off and then have our spring break, so we'd have 4 weeks. I think that was sort of the understanding, but everyone at that time was basically operating under the assumption that 4 weeks later we would all be back in school to finish up the year. And so yeah, we were not at all prepared for the idea that we would still be out, not having returned a year later. And really, it was somewhat akin to, I wished many times over the next few weeks after that, or the month or two after that, really for the whole year after that, that we could have had just a couple days to think about what we were doing and prepare ourselves and prepare the kids for what was coming. And it would have made a huge difference. As it was kind of like being on a cruise ship and, you know, striking the iceberg and not taking the time to issue life preservers and get people into lifeboats. No, we just pitched them all over the railing, and then we tried our best in the next couple of weeks to throw life preservers at them out in the water there and drop the lifeboats onto their heads as they tried to tread water. Because we thought in 2 weeks and 4 weeks we would be pulling them back on board. Not the case. We had teachers that had no clue how to use technology. I was probably a little more prepared than a lot of teachers. I had used Google Classroom to manage most of my classwork for several years, and I was a YouTuber. I had 400 videos to my credit or blame. Anyway, I had a relatively large amount of experience creating videos and being on camera, and a lot of teachers had none of that. Well, I had more than them, but I was not ready for managing all the classwork that way. So yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare in that regard, and it has been a struggle ever since. There were a few really critical mistakes, in my opinion, that we made. I'll talk about those tomorrow. It's Sunday, March 14th. I did not feel much like running today, but I made it out. But I don't feel much like walking, so I'm not going to right now. So I did do a 10K again, repeated my usual weekend run, out to a school, and then I turn around and come back. So I was mentioning that I think there are a few mistakes that we made, big mistakes that hurt us in our move to remote learning, our very unexpected and unprepared for move to remote learning a year ago at the start of the pandemic. Both of them, there are two in particular that I think were serious, and both of which are subject to debate. The first is one that was not universal across all remote learning efforts, but our district decided at the onset to not require students in Zoom meetings or Google Meet gatherings and to have their cameras on. They were allowed to, that was an option. They could have their cameras on, but it was not required. And very quickly from the start, from day one, from the go, most students did not ever turn their cameras on, did not want to have their cameras on, they did not want to be on camera. The reasons this district made this decision are laudable. One, not every student has the greatest Wi-Fi connection and the greatest bandwidth available, and using the cameras in these meetings could be a problem. And there was some sensitivity that some students are very self-conscious, and some don't feel comfortable being on camera. They're worried about bullying because school-age children can be brutal that way, and some students we wanted to protect them from in case they were not proud, if they were embarrassed about their living conditions, where they lived at, the households they were that they were residing in. And so there was a decision that they didn't have to have their cameras on. And in my experience, this turned out to be a disaster. It allowed too many students to disappear. So many of my students this year I've never seen. I have no idea what they look like, and it made it very hard to connect with them, to get to know them as an individual. This should not be required, but it just left a wall up that made it hard to get past for a lot of students. And as time went on, more and more students discovered that they could log into a Zoom meeting and basically check out. You didn't know what they were doing. You didn't know if they were engaged. There's some kind of activities and practices you can try to implement to help ascertain that a student is engaged, but they become very difficult to do with 18 to 20 students even, which is not a lot. But it's very hard to keep asking for a verbal response or some kind of indication that students are paying attention to, as opposed to when you can just see them looking at you and being in the picture, literally. So students just discovered they could log into a meeting. Their name was there in that little black rectangle on my screen, and as far as I knew, they were there. But they might be on their phone watching TikTok or playing video games or sleeping. You had no idea most of the time, and it just allowed too many students to fall through the cracks that were ever widening, and it's not gotten any better with time. And that was the first big mistake. The second big mistake, I think, was that we tried, and many are still trying, to carry on with an effort to get back to normalcy, to maintain normalcy, to teach essentially the same things in as much as possible, the same way as we taught them before. And if anything, I think one of the great benefits, which I want to talk about more in the rest of the week, one of the great benefits that can come out of this year of teaching remotely is an understanding of what are some of the most necessary skills and abilities that students need to have developed, that they need to grow, and including very strongly the ability to communicate, the ability to make connections with other people in much the same way I talked about last week when I talked about conversations. Students were not good at that. Teachers are not good at that. We're used to, while there's been moves to get away from it, teachers still often like to be the sage on the stage. And we will deliver content, we will deliver knowledge, students will absorb it, and that's how some people view the education process. That wasn't going to work and your remote learning environment. And I hope when we get back in classrooms, we don't try to get back to where we think that's the way it should be. We need to help students learn to communicate, to connect with one another and with us and with the world at large. But that effort to try to teach the same things we had taught previously, often in the same ways we tried to teach it previously, that was a disaster. So those are two big mistakes. Not having students be on camera, and two, trying to stick with the old model in a new world that proved oftentimes disastrous in a year of remote learning. Tomorrow I'll try to look at some things that I think might have come out well and we might benefit from greatly after a year of remote learning. Talk about those tomorrow. It is very cold and very windy today. I don't know whether it's picking up the sound. And it was very hard to get out, but I did go put in 5K at least. It was a good day on the family front. My daughter Leah Mulan, received the was awarded the Leon Panetta Congressional Internship today, so she'll be going to Washington. And my wife just was hired for a new job at a hospital after many, many years working in long-term care facilities. She's wanted to try her hand in a full hospital, and she's going to be starting that in a few weeks here. So good day for us. And it was a good it was a good year in some ways for education, working remotely for the first time. Now, I mentioned yesterday, in many ways and probably more ways, it was a disaster, but there were some good things. Starting with the fact that many teachers who had resisted developing any skills in technology were forced against their will, some of them, but they did finally adapt and start to adopt technology in their classroom using Google Classroom, using Flipgrid and Padlet and a ton of other things, Kahoot quizzes, just so many different apps and tools with technology that we should have been using all along, and hopefully we will remember to use more effectively once we do get back to classrooms, because they still offer a wealth of possibilities. That was a great thing. Another great thing, surprising, while many kids were lost in digital learning, remote learning, there were many kids also that it worked great for and is working great for. There are a lot of kids who in a regular school system have been neglected, forgotten, overlooked because other kids are just louder and overbearing and demand more attention, and some kids have gotten attention, been able to get the attention they needed and didn't always get in the past. Those are a couple ways that remote learning has been great. A lot of chance to work individually. So those are a couple off the top of my head. And there are more that I'm not thinking of right now because it's really cold and I want to get back inside. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Hello, it is Tuesday, March 16th, and I ran an 8K 5 miles today. It was much nicer weather, mid-50s and clear blue skies and very little wind, so it was nice, but I took it easy. So that's sort of an overview of my teaching year and under the pandemic, remote learning, all that. As a parent of 2 students, it was a struggle also, especially because I was teaching remotely and was aware of some of the things going on that way. It was I tried to do my best, I think, to be supportive, and it was frustrating because I could see some of the things that I knew were wrong in my teaching environment happening in their teaching environments, with teachers not knowing how to utilize technology as well as it could be utilized, with teachers who decided, it seemed, that because they knew students were losing out on a lot of the in-class person-to-person experience, that they would try to make that up by doubling up some of the reading assignments or research type assignments. And it wasn't that kind of an arrangement where you could make up one by increasing the workload in the other. It was very sad as the year progressed, seeing them get more and more, frankly, burn out on the process. I felt like there were a lot of missed opportunities that for teachers and students to, again, connect, to collaborate, to work together in different ways, because everyone was feeling uncomfortable and awkward in this new world, and we weren't taking the time to make those connections, to bridge those gaps. So it was a frustrating year. Now it looks like promising signs with the vaccine and better understandings of the virus, that we may be back in classrooms soon. I hope that happens. I hope that we take all the lessons to heart, both the things that we can improve on, and we don't just revert back to trying to do things the same old way, because the same old way wasn't always great. So onward and upward, hopefully. Talk to you again tomorrow. Hello, Wednesday, March 17th. Just did my sunset run. Didn't go as well as usual, struggled at the top, but they can't all be golden. So I've spoken about my year as a teacher during a pandemic and my daughter's school lives. Now about my wife. We've been married since 1998, and I've never been prouder of my wife than in this past year. She has worked as a CNA for many, many years, and she has, in the past year, taken care of many coronavirus patients, and many of her patients that didn't have coronavirus in long-term care facilities, and she has been excellent. She has been a master of the protocols to keep herself safe, our family safe, and to take care of her patients. And it would take more than this brief video to describe everything she's done, but I'm very proud of her. Just yesterday, we learned that after a decade and a half, more than a decade and a half, working as a CNA in long-term care facilities, she's just been hired to work in the cardiothoracic department at Loma Linda Hospital. She'll be starting there in a few weeks. And she's very excited to start a new path on her healthcare career. And I hope she likes it as much as she expects to. I'm sure she's going to be great, or give it her best. Okay, I will talk to you again tomorrow. It is Thursday, March 18th. Just finished a 10K. That was more of a struggle than I'd like to admit. But we'll push on and hope it's just a phase. It was a little warmer than it has been, so maybe that was part of it. I don't know. Anyway, talking about the last year, and really thinking about losses and some gains. And in education in particular, there is a great deal of concern over the losses students have experienced, things they have missed out on in the past year by being at home trying to learn remotely. Oh, look at this guy. You see him? Yeah, trying to learn remotely has been a challenge, and undoubtedly there have been some academic losses, but I think it is way too early to start totaling the costs and benefits and the pluses and minuses. Without question, and I'm not trying to minimize the COVID, the costs of COVID with, pushing towards 600,000 lives lost. But educationally, and the impact on students and kids in particular, I think it's going to be a long time, a very long time probably, before we fully understand how much it costs and what kind of things may have been gained by kids in this year. I think there are going to be benefits that we won't understand. I mean, there was suffering, there was hardship during the Depression, and by the generation that went through World War II and the Civil Rights Movement. Every generation has its catastrophes and crises to deal with. And I think it's a long time before we'll know just exactly what all the impacts of this year have been. So think about what your gains and losses have been in this past year, and let me know down in the comments, down in the doobly-doo. Let me hear from you. Till next time, don't forget to be awesome, and I will talk to you again soon, hopefully.